Hi guys, so I'm here at McNally Jackson Books for the launch party of Ash Princess tonight by Laura Sebastian, and I'm taking you along with me.
Author of the phenomenal Ash Princess, which is out today. In addition to being a brilliant author, Laura is also a phenomenal baker. Mother to a real cute puppy. You definitely should follow her on Instagram if you aren't already. And most importantly, one of the kindest, most generous, and open-hearted people I've had the pleasure of meeting and knowing in New York City. So I'm extremely happy to be here with her today to celebrate the launch of her new book. All right, so let's kick off tonight with what might be both the easiest and the hardest question. What is your book about?
So when I first sold the book, people would ask me that, and I was the worst at pitching. Like the worst. Yeah, really not it. So I was really, really terrible at it. And I would always just be like, oh, it's about a girl who's held captive, and she learns to like save herself through all these things that happen to her. And like now I've gotten really good at it. I can pitch it in 4 words. It's a Slytherin Sansa Stark story. The slightly longer pitch is that it's about a girl who is held captive from the people who conquered her kingdom for 10 years, and she's waiting for someone to save her before realizing that she has to save herself, though not through the means that you might expect.
But you definitely dive right into, the grittier stuff in this novel. Was that always the plan to be getting for the book?
I wrote the prologue with no plan whatsoever. And then I kind of looked at it, and it just came out of nowhere, and it hasn't changed, actually, more than like maybe a couple words here or there, from that first initial stage to the end. And I think it really sets the tone, it sets the scene, and from then on I think I knew what story I was telling. And I am not a violent person. I don't enjoy violence. It's not something that I really love to write about, and most of the scenes that you're talking about were really difficult for me to write. Like, I think sometimes you read a book and it seems like the author's really like enjoying the violence. Sometimes, usually when it pertains to female characters, you might see that. And it's always made me really uncomfortable, and like, it's like, I think with scenes like that, they can't be fun to write. Like, they shouldn't be fun to write. If you're writing a really gritty, horrible torture scene, like, you shouldn't enjoy writing it, or maybe you should explore other avenues for why that is. But at the same time, I knew the story I was telling. I knew that it had to do with a lot of really difficult issues with colonization, slavery, all of these things, and I knew that if I pulled punches, it also wouldn't be authentic to the story. So I knew that it had to be that way, and I had to find a way to do it justice.
So from the very beginning, was it kind of as violent and gritty as it is right now, or did some of that stuff get added a little bit later?
I think I did pull some punches in the first couple drafts. My editor does not pull punches at all, so she was always like, you can go further with this. And she was right. I recently, working on book 3, I found myself thinking, oh, this is really awful and really bloody and really messed up, and I was like, my editor's gonna love it. So yes, so it's definitely, it got layered in later with some help from her and from my agent.
Okay, so we're celebrating book 1 tonight. You're already working on book 3.
Yes.
I have heard that you maybe wrote a book or 2 before selling this one.
Yeah, I wrote.
Can you tell us a little bit about your road to publication?
I wrote 10. I think I queried 8 or 9 of them. And the thing is, I, for the longest time, was not good at sharing my work with people, and I also didn't know how to edit. So I would write a draft, and I've always, like, my first drafts have always been, like, not to brag, they've always been pretty good first drafts. So I finished it, and I was like, I thought editing meant, like, going back and, like, proofreading it. So that's what I used to do. I would go back and I was like, oh, I'm editing, and I'm proofreading, and oh, maybe changing a sentence here or there. And then I just send it off, and I would just get these, like, form rejections. Like, I think my first 1 or 2, I got no, like, not even partial requests. And, a lot of that was probably also pitching, but I just didn't know how to edit. I didn't know how to change the structural things that needed to change, and I didn't know how to dig deeper. And that was something I kind of got a little bit more toward the end of my querying days, and something I really got with Ash Princess, I think.
So how old were you when you wrote and finished your first book?
I was 17 when I started it, and I was 18 when I ended it, when I finished it and started querying. I was just in college, or just the summer before college, and I remember going to Barnes & Noble and getting, this is, 2008, so I had to buy the big directory of agents and publishers, and because it wasn't really online at the time, and most of them weren't actually accepting email queries, so I had to like actually send them through the post office and like wait for the rejections to come back through the post office. So it was not a great time. Like by the second one it all changed, but like that first one was rough.
So do you remember like your first rejection letters?
I do. Well, the first one came, like, I kid you not, it was one of the email ones, and it came like 5 minutes after. And so I sent out these queries, and I was like, oh, this is it. This is the next Harry Potter. It's so brilliant. It's the best thing ever. And like 5 minutes later, I just get this form rejection. Like, dear author, we didn't connect with this. Send us more work eventually. But like, it's like that kind of write-off thing that everyone gets. And so it's just like heartbroken. So it was crushing for me.
It's like that article, there was an article today in The Cut about how guys are now sending texts before the first date saying they don't want anything serious. Is that like the literary agent version?
I have since interned at a couple of agencies, and at the first one I looked at Slush, and I would write rejections, and so now I've kind of seen it from that side of things. So now I kind of get it a little more. Like sometimes when people say like something's not for them, like they genuinely mean that. Sometimes they're just saying it because they're like, this is not publishable in any sense of the word. But sometimes they're genuinely like, oh, okay, this is really, there's some promise here. I get the appeal, but it doesn't appeal to me. And so once I understood that, it became a lot easier to get those rejections. And they don't stop after you get an agent. They keep coming all the way. I don't think it ever ends, actually. So yeah, you kind of have to get a thick skin sooner or later.
Keep writing, kids.
Yeah. But I always, as soon as I started querying something, I would always start working on something else, which I think also helped, because all of my focus would always be in that new project. So like the rejections were like, in some ways, like, talking about my kid who's, like, off in college, and I was like, look, that kid is making their own decisions. Like, I'm working on the new kid here. So that was kind of helped me deal with things.
What?
Like,
Forgot about that kid.
Well, like, what, you kind of have to, like, they're separate from you at that point, I think. I mean, I don't know much about having, like, kids or, like, college-age kids. I did babysit for many years. But, yes, I don't really know much about, like, college-age kids, to be fair. But I imagine that's how parents must feel at some point. They're separate from you. The mistakes they make don't reflect on you anymore, I guess.
So 10 books before Ash Princess.
10 books.
Are there any of those 10 books that you would ever want to, like, resurface and maybe work with and see if you could pitch it again?
Really just the one so far, which I've reworked a bit, and I really love it now. It's a story that I've tried to write many times since I was in high school. Like, I think even before I finished the first book, like, I was writing scenes of this, and I don't think I was ready to write it then, and every time I try it, like, I look back at it and I'm like, it's almost there, but, like, it's not, I was not the writer I needed to be to write it then. Hopefully now that is not the case anymore, but I think I'm going to keep trying until it is the case, because I think that's a book that means so much to me and has meant so much to me since, for 10 years. So I think every book is the book of your heart in some ways, though.
This is a quote-unquote Slytherin Sansa Stark story, and I believe that was a tagline coined by Patrice Caldwell.
I had to. Patrice kept telling me to shorten my pitch, and then I finally shortened the pitch on my own. Yeah, it was very long, and I shortened the pitch on my own, so she pushed me to it. But like,
okay, I think she was taking credit for it on the internet, or someone gave her credit for it on the internet.
Patrice? No. She's a Slytherin.
Look, Patrice is a Slytherin, but she has her limits. She won't steal that kind of stuff.
Can you explain how she earned that title? Why is she the Slytherin Sansa Stark? Tell us a little bit about Theo.
I mean, I don't think I can do that without like going on a little bit of like Game of Thrones rant.
Let's go.
So like everyone knows they really messed up Sansa Stark's story. And,
Thank you.
Was it season 5?
Oh,
Like whenever the Rams
yeah.
Okay, so here's my thing. How I would have done it is like, so she's escaped Joffrey, but she's also seen how Marjorie handled Joffrey. And she like idolized Marjorie. So I expected her to learn from Marjorie and then like use that against Ramsay and like kind of find a way to like manipulate him and like, because she's not a fighter, she's not Arya, but she has that that connivingness about her, or it seemed at the end of like season 4. She was like gearing up, she had like the black dress and was like fierce, and like you thought she was really ready to take control, and then like season 5 started and she was like back to being season 1 Sansa. And I was so angry, and I think that's like when I started this book, so I was like, I'm gonna do this right. So yeah, that's what it was. And I think a lot of people are saying that Sansa's a Slytherin now, but I don't think she is. I think she's a Hufflepuff, because her loyalty is always like her greatest strength, but also her fatal flaw. So Theodosia doesn't have that in a lot of ways. I think her greatest strength is her conniving mind. And I think a lot of people misunderstand Slytherins, like they're not evil or mean or any of that, they're just ambitious. And I think Theo is nothing if not ambitious. I see a lot of nodding in the audience, and I know my people. But yeah, so that's kind of what I mean by that. She's conniving, and she's smart, and she's ambitious, but she's also not a fighter in the traditional way that you think of. She's more of the Sansa Stark and less of the Arya.
She does have some Arya moments, though. I will say.
I mean, I will say she uses a knife at 2 points in the book. Neither time she does it very well. She doesn't do it very well either time. But yeah, she's been like basically held captive her entire life, so she's never had the opportunity to learn how to fight the way Arya does.
Yeah, so you have been inside of Theo's head now for 3 books. Does she continue to surprise you?
Yeah, I think the first book was the hardest book to be in her head for, because she's so isolated. And that's not a great place to be mentally. And I always lead with character. I came from an acting background, so like when I write from a character's point of view, I really like get into it. And so Theo in book 1 is, especially at the beginning, is a pretty miserable place to be. And I think she kind of, over the course of the series, she obviously grows and she learns and she matures in a lot of ways. But yeah, she definitely still surprises me. Sometimes I'll like write many scenes and be like, I don't know what this character is doing here. I don't get it. And then something will happen along the way and I'm like, oh, okay. And it's a surprise. Like, I can't say too much because I'm working on book 3 and like most of y'all haven't read book 1. So like, I'm so like, I can't say it. I know. But yes, she does definitely still surprise me.
One of my favorite characters is actually her best friend, Cress. So the dynamic between them, I think, is really interesting. I mean, obviously they have this like really complex female friendship that I think is always really necessary in YA novels. But without giving too much away, their kind of roles within the story shift a lot over the course of the novel. Was it fun kind of playing around with that friendship and the way that that relationship sort of takes shape as they kind of turn into 2 different people because of their circumstances?
Yeah, I think that's another theme that got deeper as the drafts progressed. Because I think when I first started, Cress was a very shallow character. I don't think I wanted to get too close to her. And she was just like a throwaway like best friend for a little bit, and the girl I babysat for was like, I remember like I would give her pages as I wrote them, and I gave her that in like this is in the first chapter after the prologue, and she was like, Cress is my favorite. And like to understand how weird this was, like this is not her kind of character at all. She usually likes like the tomboy characters or like she likes the Aryas, and you know, if Theo's not an Arya, then Cress is definitely not an Arya. So yeah, it really took me by surprise. It made me look at that character and like what was compelling about her. And I love complicated female friendships. I think that's kind of at the heart of most things that I write. As I was trying to dig further into her character, I realized that a big thing that I didn't want to acknowledge was the place of privilege that she comes from in this world, and what growing up with that kind of privilege would mean and how it would affect the way she saw the world. And as the drafts progressed, I really kind of had to dig deeper into that in a way that was not super comfortable, but I think necessary for the book. And it definitely affected a lot of things that happened after that.
I don't want to get into too many questions that give away too many spoilers from the book, because I do want you guys to go home and read it. But there are a lot of characters that I really love, and there also is a little bit like inkling, a hint of a love triangle, which I personally love. But I do feel like it's a bit of a maligned trope.
It's gotten like a bad rep.
Yeah, it's gotten a bad reputation. So knowing that, why did you choose to do it, and how did you kind of take care to make sure that it didn't fall into, you know, any of the cliches of the stereotype?
So I didn't want to write a love triangle. I did not set out wanting to write a love triangle. I actually tried to change it so it wasn't a love triangle. Like I tried really hard, and every time I sent it to someone, they were like, "There's something missing here. There's something that's not working." It seems like this
more
is,
making out.
yeah, that ended up being like I took out a
More
makeup
sexual tension.
and I was like, now they're just gonna hug and be friends. And my agent was like, no, I really feel like they need to make out. Like it's leading right up to that. It feels like you're avoiding it on purpose. And I came to kind of think about love triangles and when they work and when they don't. And I think a big thing, I think love triangles can be really, really a powerful way to show a character's growth. And I think especially in YA, because characters are trying to figure out who they are, and I think a really great shorthand of that is what kind of romantic partner do they want. And I think one of the best ones is really Hunger Games, because at the end, I'm going to spoil Hunger Games for anyone who doesn't know. I feel like, if any earmuffs for anyone who has not read Hunger Games at this point. She has really two choices, and I think with Gale, it's giving into her anger and her hatred, and living a kind of life that would never really be fulfilling. It would always leave her, I think, a little bit empty. And Pete, on the other hand, is more about the forgiveness and the moving on and the embracing a future. And I think that love triangle and showing how she has both of these paths in front of her and the one she chooses, I think is a really good example of a love triangle. And so that's kind of what I wanted to do with this. And I also think something that helps is that there's no clear answer. Like when I was writing book one, like I remember I think my agent asked me once, she was like, so how's this gonna end? And I was like, I don't know. And she's like, I feel like she could end up with either of these guys. And I was like, you're telling me. This is where it starts getting tough. So yeah, like that, I think that's part of it is I never really thought too far ahead. And so I wanted to make these both really compelling choices. Like, I mean, when we all read Twilight, we knew it was going to be Edward. Like, I know there are some like diehard Jacob people, but like we all knew how it was going to end. And like Harry Potter was never a love triangle. Let's get that right. But like we all also knew that Hermione was going to end up with Ron. Like there was never any doubt about that. So like
not the same. And full-size kids. Not the same.
Exactly. And full-size kids. So yeah, I think that a big part of it comes down to that, where if you're reading this like couple, and the woman is like, or the girl is like clearly like very into this guy, but then there's this other guy who shows up kind of just to complicate the plot on occasion, you're obviously like, this is a really annoying thing to read. I don't want to read this. So yeah, I think it's a bit of both of those things in terms of writing a good love triangle or a fulfilling one.
All right, so now you're in the writing process of the third book. Do you have a better idea of what's gonna happen? Without like spoiling things, but like I do want to know.
My editor's here, so like I would really like to be like, yes, I know exactly what I'm doing. I know how I'm gonna end this. I have a plan for my book that is due in July. And like, yes, I know more than I did like a few weeks ago even, but it's still a process. And I think that I like to write like headlights where I know what's gonna happen in the immediate future. I know what's gonna happen like in the next scene. And once I write that scene, I will hopefully know what's going to happen in the scene after that. And as long as I can kind of keep that momentum, I can get to the end. And I think that I really like writing like that because I think it keeps the suspense going for the reader as well. And it also makes me keep wanting to write, which I think is also an important part of the writing process. You don't want to get to the point where you're like, I'm so bored of this. Or you want to get to that point a lot less, I should say, because everyone gets to that point eventually. So yeah, no, a little bit.
So have you always written that way, or at a certain point were you like, Theo, take the wheel, just like...
Like I said, I come from an acting background, so I always go for character first, and looking at, especially motivation. And I'm not going to get too technical into like theater methodologies, but the method I always really enjoyed was one where you look at what the character wants in the overall story, and that's usually something very vague, like power, or love, or safety. And then you look at what they want on a scene-by-scene basis, or like what they want in the realm of the story, and what they want in the realm of the scene, and you kind of condense it. What does this character want in this moment, and then how are they going about getting it?
I want to touch a little bit on the villains of Ash Princess, because I think that they are very compelling, and I think that there are a lot of them. I think there are a lot more than you probably maybe realized at the beginning of writing it.
Yeah, definitely more than I realized at the beginning of writing it. I think the main villain in the first book is the Kaiser, who is just evil personified. Like there's no ambiguity about it. Like he is just like evil to the core. Like any scene I wrote him, I was like, okay, what's the worst thing this person could do, and like how can I make it even worse? He's very like unambiguously evil, And I think because of that, it's easier to overlook these smaller evils that take place, but they build up, and eventually they become too difficult to ignore. But I also wanted to play with the idea of like forgiveness, and I think that comes into play a little bit more in the second book, so I can't talk about it. But the thing about being done with the second book is I'm like, oh, let me tell you about it, and everyone's like, no, don't do that. But yeah, I think it's about those evils, but I think everyone has flaws, and like at what point does a flawed person become a villain? And can they ever go back from that? And so that's kind of what I'm playing with.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's definitely something to be said about what it means to be a villain as well, because I think that some people at the beginning of the book are pretty friendly to our protagonist, and at the end are maybe not so much on her side.
I think that there's a difference between being friendly towards someone and respecting them. And I think that's the difference that really comes into play by the end of it.
Spoken like a Slytherin.
I mean, that's the thing. Like it's definitely like, I mean, Hufflepuffs aren't always nice. Like they might be nice to your face, but like it's a thing. You want someone who will respect you over being nice to you, and I think that's something that Theo kind of learns over the course of the book.
So you mentioned, I'm like, we're about to get into a philosophical discussion over Hogwarts houses.
Oh yeah. I'm ready for it.
You mentioned earlier that you used to give some of the scenes to the kids that you would babysit.
Well, the older one. The younger one was 8, I think, when I started. So, like, he was a little young for it. He might be getting ready to read it. And as I told him in the acknowledgements, like, I apologize in advance for all the kissing scenes. But there are some, like, cool stabbings. So I feel like he'll, like, get through them to get to, like, the violent scenes. So, but I did give them to Eden because she was right at that perfect age. I think when I started, she was 12, so she was like right in that sweet spot with like the target YA. And yeah, she was writing at the time, and she still is. But she was taking these writing classes, and she used to. I remember she got to like. I'm gonna embarrass her a little bit. She'd get really bummed. This is a few years ago, so like it's okay. There's some distance. She'd get really bummed because she was like, my friends are better writers than me. And I was like, they're not though, because you're seeing their finished product and not their rough drafts. And so I think part of it was me being like, you want to see my rough drafts? Like at that point she'd read some of my finished products and she liked them. But I was like, you want to see what happens before that? Here's my like, just finished it, here it is, read it, see what you think. And so yeah, that was kind of why I did it, is I wanted to show her the process there. And also it was really great feedback. I don't think I was expecting the feedback to be as great as it was. It got to the point where she would like correct my grammar and like my spelling, and I was like, all right. And I was like, but it was always great. It was always great advice. And a lot of it made it into the final draft, and I'm really glad that she helped shape it into what it is.
Yeah, because I was thinking about it, and I was like, I don't know any teenagers. Like, you're like writing a YA book, and you're like, when was the last time I talked to a teen?
In general, as like an adult, unless you have kids, like hanging out with them is unless you're a babysitter like I was, hanging out with them is weird. Like there's like a weird, if you're not a parent or like an aunt or something, like you don't want to like be friends with a teenager. Like it's a weird line to cross. But luckily I had a job where like it was not weird, so I took full advantage of it.
So did you feel like it was a different writing process, writing it kind of with like having the kids around as opposed to like writing beforehand?
Not really. So I think it just helped me like focus on the audience, and also seeing what she was reading, because I think a lot of times what teens are actually reading is not what we in like the YA community think they're reading, and I think that was a really interesting thing to see. Like the books that I was like, oh, this is a huge book, she would read it and be like, meh. My friends aren't talking about that. They're talking about this one, and it was like this book that I had not really heard of, and so that really changed it, and it helped me to see what about books really appealed to teens, and I think that helped a lot.
So one kind of final big thing that I wanted to talk about from the book is the way that you tackle grief. So both Theo and her best friend Cress are dealing with the loss of their mothers, and that seems to have a really profound impact on the way that they kind of act throughout the novel, I think in ways that they don't even realize. So how was it sort of balancing, like, I think, the inner emotional turmoil of two teenage girls who don't have moms with, like, also this, like, super, like, fast-paced, like, adventurous narrative that is, like, constantly moving forward?
Yeah. Well, I think not even just beyond Theo and Cress, there is no main character in the book that has not lost someone really important to them. And I think that like big part of that was it's a book about, you know, like I said, a war-torn, colonized country. So like everyone there has lost parents. I think everyone in the book is literally an orphan. Like I just told my dad, I was like, I can't dedicate this book to you because like literally all the parents are dead. So like it's just so yeah, like all the parents are dead. Like people talk about losing siblings. boyfriends, girlfriends, like everyone loses someone really important to them, and I think that's just, again, it's like necessary to the story. But it also did show the growth, and it showed also how they react to new people, because I think there's a trust that's kind of lost with a lot of them, where they don't trust easily, because there's always that, they've kind of learned over the years that if you get close to someone, they could easily die, and then you're left bereft again. And so I think they all have a very interesting relationship with grief in that sense, where like no one really seems permanent. But with Theo and Cress specifically, with their mothers, it was not an intentional thing that I did. But yeah, the more I played with it, the more I realized that they both had that. I was looking at like what drew them to each other, because they come from very different worlds, and they come from very different backgrounds. Like there's no reason for them to connect the way they do, or for them to become friends the way they do. But the fact that they both lost mothers was what kind of connected them to me. Though of course it gets complicated because, and this is in the first chapter, so it's not a spoiler, the reason Theo's mom is dead is because Cress's dad literally killed her. So there's also that like little bit of a twist and like a complication that makes it a little bit more complicated. Right?
Yeah, but it's nice that you set up that sort of forgiveness dynamic right at the very beginning for Theo.
Yes, yeah. I think she was growing up with no one. She had no one in her life, and I think without Cress, she would not have survived. Like, I think the grief really would have killed her. She would have had no, I think hope is a really big thing in the books. She would have had no hope, no light at the end of the tunnel, no light at all in her life. And I think that was the only thing that kept her alive those 10 years, was having that one ray of light.
So what would you say was the hardest part about writing Ash Princess? Besides the 10 books that came before it.
I think definitely, like I said, the violent scenes were really, really difficult to write. I mean, there were a lot of them. So those are the hard ones to write. Yeah, I think that was the toughest part. And then also, like I said, being in Theo's head is not a pleasant place to be. And especially telling it's in first person present tense. So having that, everything she goes through be so immediate, like there's no filter there. It's all happening to her as the book happens. So you're experiencing it as the reader. And it's not a pleasant place to be. And I think it was something that I definitely shied away from in earlier drafts. So going back and like digging deeper was a challenge for sure.
Yeah, I mean, reading it was like wild, so I can't even imagine having to write it.
I remember there was a scene, and like I usually will write a whole scene in a day. Like that's just, I usually write a whole scene in a single sitting, just to like get it, have it be immediate, have it be like one coherent piece. And there were a lot of scenes in this book where I could not do that. I could not write a whole scene uninterrupted. I had to take breaks. I had to like walk my dog, live my life, go out, see friends, come back, and tackle it renewed. And yeah, I think again they were necessary scenes to write, but they were definitely really difficult to get through in the moment.
Are you considering getting into any of the other characters' heads in the future books? Or is it going to be Theo all the way through?
So people think that book 2, I've had several people tell me who have read the book tell me that they think book 2 is going to be told from another character's point of view. It's not. It's all Theo. It's not. I like as soon as they said it, I was like, oh, I see why you're saying this. No, it's all Theo. I mean, maybe, but like, there's no one. I think we get enough of them with this narrative. There are some characters who are really fun to write. Like Artemisia, I would love to write like at least like a short story from her point of view, because like her voice is so different from Theo's. Mm-hmm. She's my snarky baby, and I love her. But like I don't know if I could do a whole book with her. Like that would be a lot. But like a short story from her point of view would be fun.
If that was the most challenging part, what would you say was the most rewarding part about writing Ash Princess?
So growing up, I had a lot of people who would assume that I was, in high school and middle school, who would assume that I was unintelligent. And I don't know what it was. I think I had like a very high-pitched voice. Like I was blonde, I was bubbly, I was a cheerleader. People tended to think that I was ditzy. I literally I remember my at 8th grade graduation, the principal literally, doing her speech where she called out like everyone in my small middle school, literally called me like the dumb blonde girl. Not like, I don't think she said dumb blonde, but she said like blonde, like with the implication of dumb. And I remember like that really got to me, and after a certain point, like I was just like, well, it's easier to just pretend to be that, and because then I know what people expect of me, and I know how to this is the Slytherin in me, how to use it. Like if your teacher treats you like you're dumb, then you can get away with a lot of stuff. And I think the Slytherin in me realized that really quickly. So I think the fun thing about writing Theo was that Theo does that same thing. A lot of people in the book think she's weak, they think she's easy to keep down, and so they don't look at her too carefully. And she kind of understands what people see when they look at her, and she knows how to use that against them. And so that was a really fun thing to key back into and to take a little bit of revenge in that sense, because I gave her that part of me that I have always been a little bit at odds with, I think. And so exploring that, I think, was good for me, and I think it was good for the book.
So how does it feel to finally be up here with your published book then, considering all of that?
I didn't say, people have
Did you
asked me
post
that.
on Facebook, like, Dumb Blonde got a book deal?
I haven't posted on Facebook today, but like I was telling someone recently, I was like, I feel like the only reason I ever go on Facebook is to like brag to people who like underestimated me, which is true. And there's a lot of that, and I think, but yeah, I kind of definitely. What was the question?
I just wanted to know how it felt. Yeah.
It feels good. It feels good. I haven't been on Facebook today, but a lot of people are asking me today how it feels to like have the book out, and the answer to that is that I had a year and a half between getting the book deal and today, and it seemed like it was going to be so far away, and then today happened, and I was like, oh wait, I'm not ready for this. So it kind of took me by surprise. Like it seemed like it was going to take forever, and then it happened really quickly. And I know there are some people who have like books coming out next year who are probably feeling the same way. Don't worry, it's going to happen real fast when it happens. So get ready.
I'm going to do a really quick lightning round of questions with you.
Okay.
All right. Number 1. My favorite book growing up was?
Ella Enchanted.
Oh,
That's a good one. I wrote Ella Enchanted fanfiction.
Oh.
That's not a lightning round answer.
Follow
Find me after.
What about the movie?
I have a soft spot for that movie because I think it was
a great movie.
I think it was
dancing.
I don't think it was a great
I love the movie.
adaptation, but I think it was a fun movie.
Yes.
It was
Yeah.
fun. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. The YA book you wish you had written is?
Ooh. Winter's Curse.
Ooh,
Winter's
yeah, that's a good
Curse.
one. The YA heroine you wish you could be?
Hermione.
Except she ends up with Ron.
I did write a lot of Hermione Malfoy fanfiction. Like in hindsight, I look back and I'm like, that would not have gone well.
No.
But like, I think it comes back to the respect.
All right. The 2018 book you can't wait to read?
I feel like I've read so many great ones, but that's all I'm thinking of right now. What one? Oh, I haven't started Anger as a Gift yet. So that's by Marco Shiro. It comes out May 22nd. So I've heard it's amazing, so I'm very excited to dig it.
It's pretty good.
Decide.
All right. Your favorite YA love story is? Can't say Hermione and Ron.
Here's the thing. I will tell them that I can't say Hermione. Can I just say like Winter's Curse again? 'Cause that's
No.
It's a good one. That's a good one.
It's a real great love story.
If you could have any writer in the world blurb your book, who would it be?
Ooh.
No one in this room.
No.
Don't cop out.
No. So for dreaming big, like I would go with J.K. Rowling, but like I feel like we're not the same vibe, so maybe not. Gil Carson's mine.
Oh. Yeah.